Hello, welcome to Steel City Business, the Sheffield Business Podcast. I'm James Marriott. I'll be your host as we explore the vibrant business scene of the glorious city of Sheffield. Now, in each episode, we meet someone from across the Steel City to learn more about them and, of course, their business. I run my own business. It's called Sound Media, and it's all about helping brands to amplify their voice through audio marketing. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes. There's more information there. And this podcast is supported by the lovely people at The Curious, creative agency in the centre of Sheffield. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, maybe to suggest a guest or for any reason, then there are contact details in these show notes, or head to steelcity.business. Right, that's enough of that. Let's meet our guest.
Hello, I'm Daniel Blaney, co-founder of Ferrio and co-organiser of Sheffield Start-Up Meet-Up.
Welcome along to Steel City Business. Good to have you with us. I think we've got a few interesting things that we're going to probe away and explore today. First of all, well, tell us about you. Tell us about what was your early career?
Oh, yeah, it was all over the place. If I go right back to university, I did psychology at university.
Oh, okay.
I picked that at random at A-level. I was like, I don't know what that is, so I'll try that. And then I enjoyed that the most out of my A-levels. So I did that at university, absolutely no plan whatsoever. Did a master's in sport and exercise psychology. So mountain biking is probably my sort of number one hobby, which led me there. And then finished university, absolutely no idea what to do. I had a look at came across the RISE programme. There were all sorts of really interesting jobs on there. And one of them was for a company called Sent Into Space, who do basically marketing stunts with weather balloons, stick a camera on a weather balloon. I'm probably explaining it really badly, but it's been years. And went for that one. Psychology degree wasn't particularly relevant there. But worked there for a good 3 years. It was an incredibly fun job. Made some really good friends there. And then decided it was kind of time to sort of pick a longer term career path. And he's actually a friend of mine through mountain biking. His dad ran a software company here in Sheffield, and I'd been through this kind of pestering process. Go on, Andrew, have you got any jobs going? Managed to get a job there, and within about 6 months, I kind of realised, okay, this is kind of the career for me.
Yep.
So it's kind of at the emergence of sort of no-code, low-code tools. So I suddenly found, I could either go to the developers and say, hey, the customer needs this, and then it just kind of disappears into the morass and maybe comes back slightly wrong 6 months later. Or through no-code tools, I could just build it myself. And the product they were making, so this company called Solar Vista, was really flexible, really kind of flexible tools. So it had a core template, you could use it out of the box, but if you wanted to configure it to do specific stuff, it did that really, really well. So a lot of my work there was integrating that system with other systems. So a lot of their customers, their client would have their own system that they managed work in, and they wanted to automatically pull that through and push updates back. So that became a large part of my job there. And that was the inspiration for Ferrio. I was finding that the kind of no-code, low-code tools for integration just weren't up to scratch. So kind of said, okay, cool, let's make our own one. And, at that stage, didn't really know anything about running a business. I knew a thing or two about integrating software packages, but very little about marketing, sales, operations. And we're just like, we'll figure that out as we go. The first 2.5 years were pretty painful. You know that you've got a lot to learn, but you've got no idea how much you've got to learn. And then now, 3 years into that Ferrio journey, things are it's working. We found a model that works. The product is absolutely fantastic. It blows my mind every time I use it that this is something that was built by my business partner Alex. It was built by one person in 2.5 years, and it's bloody better than what Microsoft can come up with Power Automate. So there's something there. But also we found a niche. That's responded really well to our offering and service. Over the last 6 months, hit a really good stride. Brought on Mark Cody as our sales director. He was actually an early customer. I think he was customer number 2.
Cool.
And kind of loved the concept. Obviously took a huge gamble on working with us. And then, we stayed in touch. And now 3 years later, he's working with us, and he's been instrumental in that success. We found the niche, but I was not the right person to attack it. We needed someone who knew what they were doing.
Interesting. I want to talk a lot more about Ferrio and kind of what you do and the product. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Sent into Space, because I honestly I don't think I'd come across this business, this organisation, before I came across you. I do have a weird obsession with all things related to space, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. I believe wholeheartedly the NASA logo is the greatest logo of all time. The worm one, not the other rubbish one that they use. But Sent in Space, this is kind of fascinating, because I just thought, all right, that's an interesting name for like a marketing business. But then started looking at some of the things that you've done, and it is weird. Like, there's some really unusual things. Like, so they launched a thing whereby people can have their ashes scattered in space. And you did something involving a balloon flight in Bangladesh. Like, some amazing stuff. I mean, you pick the things that you want to tell us about, but tell us about some of the things that you got up to there and why. Like, it just sounds so unusual.
Yeah, so we're going back a bit, but yeah, I mean, things like the Bangladesh flight. We actually flew out to Bangladesh. The core of the project was about kind of raising awareness of the Rohingya refugees and the kind of crisis around that. So we actually went to this refugee camp to launch the balloon. And it was staggering. And I think that's one of the many things I kind of really appreciate from that job, is that I'd never have done that if it wasn't for that job. I mean, the scale of the place was kind of mind-boggling, and we're there sort of driving through in a rented Land Cruiser with some hydrogen canisters. So a note on hydrogen: it's cheaper and much lighter than helium. Ignore the exploding bit. And I mean, we kind of, we launched sort of on the top of the hill where, there were cameras there, so we had good vantage point. And I remember at one point just looking around 360 degrees, it was refugee campers as far as you could see. Right. And yeah, you kind of started to forget about the balloon a little bit, but they all loved it. This is the most exciting thing that's happened in, non-negative, exciting thing that's happened in a while. Kids absolutely loved it all. And we were sending up. It was a TV basically, and they wanted to kind of have some video messages playing out the TV. You imagine it was a CRT as well, so pretty heavy. Yeah, way too heavy for a weather balloon to lift. So we had to kind of completely strip it out. It's just the case, and it was still pushing the limits of what you can attach with a camera to a weather balloon. So yeah, that was a really interesting one. I mean, it took me to the States as well. So if you've been in any kind of sneaker trainer store recently, you've probably seen those Crep Protect cans, the kind of spray you spray on the shoes. So they wanted to demonstrate that it was so good that it could protect your trainer even in space. So they actually shipped us out to LA and New York to launch. I mean, that was a hell of a rig. We had kind of had the shoe suspended on fishing wire, and I'm not an arts and crafts sort of person. I'm not very good at tying really, really small knots. So that was an interesting project. But that was the only time I've been to the US. Was for that project. Was for work. Most of the flights were in the UK. Spent a hell of a lot of time on the A19 chasing balloons that were floating off to the southeast. So it's not all international global trips. There's plenty of A-road bashing involved.
It sounds like a really interesting first proper job. Like, most people would be like, I don't know, in an office doing filing paperwork or something quite kind of mundane. It sounds like you did some really exciting stuff. My only kind of question off the back of that is, doesn't everything else that you've done since just feel a little bit boring at the side of sending sneakers into space?
I mean, sometimes there's something to be said for boring. I mean, it took me a while to adjust, when I first went to work for Solar Vista. And, we kind of followed a 9-to-5 structure at Sent into Space, but there were lots of early starts that meant early finishes and vice versa. But actually just sort of sitting at a desk in front of a computer for 8 hours a day certainly took some adjusting to. But yeah, I mean, I kind of genuinely really enjoy what I do for work now. And I'm kind of aware that not many people get to say that. And there are definitely days where I miss driving around the country with a radio tracker, hunting weather balloons down. But there were days when those early starts, I'm not a morning person. Yeah. There were days when that could be pretty stressful. I mean, there were days when software can be pretty stressful.
There's probably a longevity on being able to do that. It's fun for a bit, and then you kind of maybe crave that slightly more kind of grown-up approach to work. So, I mean, I guess this leads us neatly on to talking more about Ferrio. So, for anyone that doesn't know, then just kind of give us the spiel. What's the business all about?
No, I mean, there's a reason we brought a sales and marketing director on, because I am bad at this spiel.
Okay.
But
you're with friends here, it's fine. However you want to phrase it.
I mean, the crux is that we integrate software systems. We make software systems talk to each other. It goes a little bit beyond that sometimes into the kind of world of process automation. But primarily, we take software system A, make it talk to software system B. So whether that's a client system pulling work data in, whether that's a supplier system pulling stock and price data in, or it's internal systems as well. Get your HR system talking to your finance system properly. And we have a platform for that. We have customers who are developers and work on our platform, and that's really exciting for us, because that's kind of, that was the day one plan. But the bulk of our business is service oriented. So customer comes to us and says, hey, I need system A talking to system B. Can you guys make that happen? Because we're working on our own platform, our own tools, we can do that really quickly as well. It's all focused on making kind of the maintenance and management of that easier. Business process changes, right? If you've hard-coded everything and then the customer comes to you and says, oh, we're not doing it that way anymore, we want the process to work like this, and it's going to take you 2 months to change that, that's a problem. Whereas for us, we can have that call at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll say, right, let's have another call at 4. We'll have changed it by then.
Tell me if I'm wrong on this. It feels like you're in a space that probably moves pretty quickly, that can change pretty quickly as kind of new stuff comes along. That's a very technical way of phrasing that. How kind of far into the future can you really think in terms of where you sort of want and expect the business to go? Because I guess a lot of it is outside of your hands, kind of like what software people will be using that you need to kind of integrate into in maybe even just 5 years. It's quite hard to predict, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, you can't really predict the next Zero or the next ChatGPT. I mean, our plan to cover that off is to be as broad as we can in our offering. On the one hand, right now there's a constant increase in demand for integration. There's lots of very specialist systems out there. So as a business, whereas before you might have an ERP or maybe a finance system, and then everything else just happens in Excel and is just not automatable. Whereas now, even a small business can have 5 or 6 different systems that they're using, that they're having to kind of manually move data between. I think that both, if there's one of the industries we're working in, someone suddenly emerges with some kind of super ERP that can just do everything and doesn't need integration. I mean, it's not going to happen, because the tech's been there for decades. There's a reason why no one's built that. It's hard. But if one of our industries, suddenly the demand for integration there falls off, if we're working across 10 different industries, then the risk is kind of covered off there.
Yeah. I was slightly reluctant to raise the issue of AI on any podcast, because it feels a bit of a lazy thing to ask people about. It's so obvious. But what role does it play in what you do and the world that you're kind of operating in? Kind of position myself as a bit of an AI skeptic. Right. But I think that actually puts us in a position where we can see you can see where it's actually going to be useful. As with any kind of tech hype cycle, it's going to change the world. It's going to change how we do business. It's going to change everything. And actually, most of what we've got so far is you put some text in and get some text out. And for us, we've contemplated, is there a way we can weave AI into the core of our product, into the core of our platform? Instead of we have like this very visual flowchart based drag and drop workflow designer, or maybe that could be, a bot that you talk to, but AI is not very structured. Whereas a flowchart it's very clear. You can look at it at a glance and say, it does this, it does this, it does this. It's a controlled environment. Where we're using it is kind of on specific projects. So we're working with a really small, very forward-thinking tuition company in Sheffield at the moment, and they have tutors who are out providing tuition to pupils. They have them write a report at the end of every term. Those reports, the grammar's often bad. There's occasionally kind of unintentional negative sentiment, or you kind of get their point, but you think,
or maybe you didn't have to express it quite like that.
Sure.
So stuff like that, right? We take that text, we feed it into an AI, and out comes some text with correct grammar, negative sentiment perhaps corrected there, maybe a few points have been fleshed out a little bit or padded out. So for things like that, fantastic. But the core of our product is all about kind of tight, fine control, defining a process and then following it the same way every time. So for us at that level, AI is just, it's not interesting to us because the outputs are pretty unreliable.
Right, okay. That's interesting. Let's talk about startups then. Let's talk about the startup scene in Sheffield. So first of all, how did you get involved in the Sheffield Start-Up Meet-Ups? And also just chat to me a little bit about kind of, the startup world in Sheffield and where it's at the moment.
So when Alex and I decided we were going to start Ferrio, we had absolutely no idea that there was going to be any kind of tech or startup scene in Sheffield. I mean, it didn't even cross our minds to kind of look. And I've lived in Sheffield my whole life. I grew up in Hillsborough, had a brief stint in North Wales for university, and I've been back for 10 years now, I suppose. Yeah. And it just didn't cross our minds. And then I can't remember if it was through LinkedIn or Eventbrite or something like that, but Alex saw the Sheffield Start-Up Meet-Up and said, "Well, let's go to this." And it was the first one that was being run kind of post-COVID, it's August 21 because that was when we started. Yeah. And it was in the amphitheatre behind the train station.
Yeah.
So very, very kind of public location. So we went to that and thought, I'll check it out. And it was really well attended. There were kind of 40 people there.
Oh, wow.
At the time, it was being run by Denislav Ivanov.
Yeah.
It just kind of opened up this world to us and, discovering, there's this Team SY thing coming. There is actually a community and an ecosystem around startups in Sheffield. There are loads of success, outside your kind of PlusNet, etc. There are genuinely loads of successful ones around. And then put us on to Sheffield Tech Parks and the Cooper project there. So within a couple of days, we'd signed up to that. It was great, free, first thing first, we had a free co-working space, so we weren't just kind of isolated in our respective bedrooms working on the project. And then just entered this community, and you've got people there's loads of people in our band who are kind of just starting out, never run a business before, loads to figure out. There are people around who are post-exit and ready to help. And then, Team SY came along, and there was suddenly loads of this kind of structured support available for tech startups in Sheffield. And then, I guess, that led on to that startup meetup. We became regular attenders, and then Dennis moved back to Bulgaria. Someone needed to pick it up, so myself and Gary Neville picked that one up. Not the footballer.
Got to say that every time.
Yep. I guess it's been a year of running that now. So there's this really kind of exciting scene for it.
Is Gary Neville's dad called Neville? Because that would just be perfect. Because obviously the footballer Gary Neville, his dad is called.
Is he a Neville as well?
Neville, yeah.
There you go. I'll ask him next time I see him.
I kind of find the startup world sort of fascinating. I think startups generally are just really exciting. Always really keen on getting startups on this podcast because I just love hearing about people that are doing things that are different and interesting and disruptive, and there's kind of no fear there, and I sort of love that about the startup world. So a few weeks ago, we had Tom Wolfenden on the podcast talking a bit about what's going on at Sheffield Tech Parks, but then also talking a bit about what was happening. At that time, it was still kind of the latter preparing stages for the opening of Lear's Yard, which of course is now open, and you are now based there. So tell us a little bit about that. What's it like being there?
Lear's was kind of presented to us as a natural progression, I suppose. So obviously, seeing Tom on a pretty much daily basis at Tech Parks, we were kind of in the loop from very early on with what was going on with it, and we could see that it was a really exciting project. So within Tech Parks, we started out just me and Alex in the co-working space, built up through progressively bigger offices, and then down to a slightly smaller one. We realised we'd overstretched a little bit.
Right, okay.
and then we started talking about spaces available in Lear's Yard, and I only took one look at it to see that's where we wanted to go. Our office is kind of above where the bookshop is, up on the second floor. So much character. It's exposed brick all the way around. We've got windows on both sides. There's big wooden beams. All this stuff. We love that shit.
Yeah, it is also. I went on the opening day, been back a couple of times since, and you just think it's so easy to just think, yeah, just bulldoze it and build like a new office block there. That would have been so easy and so much cheaper, I would imagine, than what they've done. Which genuine, like seeing those pictures kind of taken from the front, looking down, and then comparing them to the photos that they've got of like the original kind of complex that was there, and how sympathetic it is to that original feel. I just think, I mean, there can't be a cooler place to have your business based at the moment in Sheffield than there. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm pretty convinced we've got the best office in the whole yard as well. So
that means you've got the best office in Sheffield.
We've got the coolest.
We're calling that right now.
Yep, it's a really inspirational project because for Tom and James, it's it had to be a passion project, like you said. You did the simplest thing to do would be to knock it all down and just sling something new up, right down to the finest details. They've kept it as close to the original as possible, and yet it still works. It's commercially viable. It's busy all the time. It's so weird, kind of peeking out the window on a mid-morning on a Monday, and there's people milling around the yards checking out the shops. It had to be a passion project for it to work at all, for it to even get off the ground. Someone had to do that because they really wanted to do it, not because it was a quick buck. But yeah, it also works, and it's a fantastic office space. And there's a kind of new community forming around there as well. We're all in touch with each other, the vendors, obviously. I try to buy my lunch from within the yard as often as I can afford to.
Yeah, fair. Kind of cool part of town as well, isn't it, with all the stuff that's happening around Cambridge Street, heart of the city generally. Me and Tom talked at length about that in that episode, if anyone wants to go back and have a listen to it. And actually some of that feels kind of out of date already, only a couple of months later. It just feels like it's just moving at such a pace around there, which is brilliant to see and really important for Sheffield, which is fab. What about the future then? Because obviously I guess you're probably limited in terms of the space that's available there. Have you kind of thought about maybe in 5 years, 10 years we'd like to be in a place like such and such?
It's a thought I've been avoiding. So in the unit we're currently in, you could sit 8 people.
Right.
Yeah, there's only 4 of us in there at the moment. You could probably squeeze 10 in, but it'd be a squeeze.
Yeah.
It'd be uncomfortable. So, based on our growth plans, we might have to leave Leah's Yard at some point. And I've just got my head in the sand about that one.
Fair.
I think there are other units that might come available. And then, particularly if we're sort of one side of a stairwell, so maybe if the unit below us or the unit opposite us on the stairwell came available, that would be kind of a natural.
Yeah.
And I think as a software business, ideally, you're not that resource intensive. We think we might be able to meet some of our medium-term growth plans without massively growing the team. We definitely need. We need twice as many people right now. We need all 8 of those desks filled. That would make my life a lot easier. But yeah, we probably don't need to build a kind of 50 to 100 employee company for it to really work. Especially if kind of in the longer term we can move towards having customers kind of using our product directly to build their own integrations, or say a network of delivery partners who are using our product to speed up their own workflow. I generally haven't really thought about kind of what would be next, but it would have to be somewhere as characterful as Leah's, to move from there to a kind of normal office. I just don't think we could do it, especially given we'd probably been there for a few years by that point. And
it's interesting now, isn't it? Like your office and where you're based is much more a kind of a significant part of your brand image than maybe it was a few years ago. We're recording this at Ride Shotgun, which is we talked about this on the episode with Andy, who's one of the founders of the business a few weeks ago. But this is kind of like a converted warehouse kind of, and it has a feel which is maybe not. It's a much more industrial feel to what you get somewhere like Years Yard, but it feels like it's a building that's got a bit of a story to tell. It's lived a bit. It's not just a kind of identikit office that's just kind of been built up anywhere. So I find that really interesting. I'm sorry in advance if this feels like a negative question, and I'm just going to ask it exactly as it kind of popped into my head when you were talking there. Could you ever see a scenario where you leave Sheffield, or will this always be home for the business? Or is that impossible to answer?
No, I think it's easy to answer. I don't think we'd ever leave Sheffield.
That's the answer I want.
Sheffield is home for me.
Yep.
I think Sheffield is a really good place to run a business. And if nothing else, I know that a lot of people I've spoken to prefer a less simplistic answer than this, but in a world where you can kind of work from anywhere. So if you're working in tech, marketing, anything digital, you can work from anywhere, right? So why not work somewhere that's nice? I'm a very outdoorsy person, so having the Peak District on the doorstep is a must-have. Maybe we'd open like a second or third office somewhere if things are going really well, but it has to be somewhere cool like Turin or Vancouver or something. Those are not just off the top of my head; they are on my hit list actually.
Excellent. Good
but headquarters will always be Sheffield.
Okay, I love that. I also wanted to ask you a bit about, so you've done, and this is not particularly unusual, but you've done quite a bit of volunteering work in the past. What is unusual is that it's taken you off to different parts of the world, particularly Africa. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was with a Sheffield-based charity called Dig Deep, and I actually started talking to them when I was at university in Bangor in North Wales, and they just kind of sort of reached out through a few Facebook groups for someone to kind of recruit and lead a fundraising team from Bangor University. I'd never really done anything like that before. I was having a bit of a phase at the time where I was just transitioning from my third year into my master's, and I was just through first year, second year, the first half of third year, I was the worst student.
Right.
And I kind of realised I was at a point where I was doing my dissertation. I was like, oh, hold on, if I actually apply myself, I can actually do something. So I just signed up to this master's, which if you told me that 12 months before I was going to do that, I said, no way, that looks like hard work.
Right.
And then that opportunity with Dig Deep came up at the same time, and I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'd never really done any fundraising before either, so I kind of had that was extremely difficult for me, just coming up with ideas to get people in a room and try and get donations from them. Students are obviously not the best people to look for when you're trying to fundraise for a charity, but older relatives perhaps are. So that the whole point was we were going to fundraise for this trip to climb Kilimanjaro. So there's kind of something exciting in it for us as well. Outdoorsy person, I thought, I'm going to smash it. Kilimanjaro is going to be a piece of cake. I think from the second morning I had altitude sickness, and apparently it's quite random.
Right.
I remember that the people in the group who were absolutely fine the whole way. It's just like having a really bad hangover.
Right.
It just doesn't go away. You feel sick, you got a headache, you feel tired, and then I had to climb this mountain. And so going back to Dig Deep and their mission, they're a small charity, and it kind of lets them be quite agile but quite focused at the same time. They're still based here in Sheffield, still quite regularly in touch with them.
Well.
I really, really, really like the kind of root of their mission, which is just clean water projects. It's toilets and it's clean water projects, and it's really simple. And I remember they used an example when I was first talking to them about someone else had gone to a school and given them a washing machine. They wash their clothes. Lovely idea, but they didn't have any electricity or any water to put in the washing machine. And they've got a base out there in Kenya, and they've got a whole team out there. So when you do the Kili trip, there's students from all over the UK. There's hundreds of students every year do that trip. So you can't necessarily go to the actual villages where they're installing the toilets and the clean water projects. I've been donating on a monthly direct debit ever since. And I had the opportunity, was it last year or 2 years ago? I'm hopeless with time. Hopeless with the passage of time. I think 2 years ago I had the opportunity to actually go to some of the places in Kenya where they'd installed like water collection projects and new toilets in schools out there. And that was absolutely incredible. And we weren't climbing Kilimanjaro, but that one was so much more special. Yeah, went out there with my fiancée Sophie, who I actually met climbing Kilimanjaro.
Oh, cool.
The first time round. So we can say we met in Heathrow Airport and then flew to Tanzania together.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, that was a really special trip. And long term, I'd like to be able to support Dig Deep in a some kind of larger way. Plan A right now is build a business, build some kind of economic, financial success, and then I'll have the opportunity to kind of look at how I can maybe do some good with that. It's easy to get distracted sometimes. I'm like, no, we've got a plan. Let's build a business, and the good stuff can come later on.
Interesting to hear you kind of say stuff like that about, you know, building the business, and you've obviously got kind of aims, ambitions, direction. How do you think, when you referred to kind of university, Daniel, who's maybe a bit lazy and wasn't really kind of applying, how do you think he would feel hearing you speak like that?
I don't know. He'd probably think I was a twat. And I think I'd think much the same of him.
What a great answer.
I remember having this conversation with a friend. I met up with some old uni friends for someone's wedding a couple of weeks back. We were talking about, you know, you think about your 19-year-old self. Would you even get on with them? And it's funny, 'cause I don't think we would. Don't think we'd see eye to eye at all. But yeah, you know, you're a teenage boy, aren't you, when you're at university? And there's some crap you need to get out of your system sometimes.
Well, thank you for your time. It's been really good to chat. Just before we finish, if there is anyone that's to find out more about Ferrio, more about what kind of work you're doing, and maybe even see whether it's something that might be worth them looking at for their business, what's the best way for them to do that? Weirdly,
LinkedIn seems to be our kind of main mode of communication nowadays. So yeah, find us on LinkedIn. Mark's the guy to talk to nowadays. He's the one who can actually properly explain what we do. I get tangled up in the actually doing what we do and forget how to explain it. So, yeah, LinkedIn's the way.
All right. Thank you for your time. It's been really good to chat to you today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of Steel City Business. It's been really lovely to have you with us. Now, you know how this works. If you've enjoyed it and you want in on future episodes, then just follow us on your podcast app or on YouTube. The show is very active on LinkedIn. Just search for Steel City Business and come and connect with me as well while you're at it. Big thank you to The Curious for helping make this podcast happen. There's loads more about the show at steelcity.business, and you can get in touch by emailing james@steelcity.business. And hey, if you're in business in Sheffield, then, well, why not put yourself forward as a guest for a future episode? And of course, we're always open for a good chat about how audio marketing could work for your brand. Until next time, thanks for listening.